Good afternoon and welcome to the Middle East Forum's weekly podcast. My name is Lauri Regan, and on behalf of MEF, I thank you all for joining today and for your continued support of the critically important work that we do. We are joined this afternoon by Dr. Oshrit Birvadker, a senior fellow at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security and a leading expert on India's foreign and national security policy. Oshrit will be sharing her insights with us on India and a time for change, and in particular will discuss India's strategic partnerships with the United States and Israel, examining the emerging trilateral potential among the three countries and related matters. Oshrit will speak for about 20 minutes, followed by 10 minutes of audience questions. So if you'd like to ask a question, please feel free to use the Q&A or chat function at the bottom of your screens to enter your submission. I'll do my best to get to as many of your questions as possible. Today's podcast is being recorded and will be available for future viewing. So please do share the link with those in your networks you think would be interested in learning more about this very timely and important topic. Welcome, Oshrit, and thanks so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank
I
you,
want
Laurie.
I want to ask you to begin our discussions with an overview of where you see U.S.-India relations and perhaps include a brief historical overview as well. If you could also share, which I believe that you're planning on doing, your thoughts on the significance of India's Prime Minister Modi meeting with Chinese President Xi last fall and have suggested is demonstrating India's shift towards better relations with perhaps China and Russia as things might be souring with the U.S. I think that things have changed, as you pointed out, within the past couple of minutes. So please share with us this timely information.
Well, if we look at the history of India and US relations during the Cold War, it often looked like India's national interests were fundamentally at odds with America's, especially when it comes to what we call this geopolitical chessboard. And this bipolarity of this era positioned them on the opposite sides. Even though India tried to be neutral, but eventually it chose and signed this treaty, the friendship treaty with USSR. And adding to that, there was also that deep suspicion of American capitalism and what they saw as this new generation of Western imperialism. And we need to understand that these suspicion came out and they were born out of this new and young India. The India of 1949, the post-colonial, post-British, post-partition, post-traumatic, but I think most profoundly, a very proud India in its non-aligned foreign policy that reject the idea of alliances as a core principle even today. But then things change. The USSR collapsed, the millennium turns, and suddenly Washington perceived India more than they just a former British colony or a former USSR friend. They started to perceive India as the ultimate counterweight for a rising China and also as a massive market for American tech. I think it wasn't, as well that this wasn't an overnight romance. It took almost 25 years of slow and painful building. We had some roadblocks like the 1998, the Fukushima nuclear tests, but I think, the economic momentum really smoothed things out. And eventually by the 2000s, the money started flowing. So when I think about it, definitely George W. Bush and Manmohan Singh were that was the moment that was a game changer, the signing of the civil nuclear deal. And then you had Narendra Modi, who definitely strengthened this relationship. And but of course, even Narendra Modi and his predecessor, the whole idea that we need to build this relationship and build this trust slowly, because you still help Pakistan, our enemy. So that required time. And I think the idea was that it must be a win-win situation, right? So definitely it took time. And then the relationship, they kind of backed it in formal military agreements. And then we saw much more tighter economic links. But if we look at it today, fast forward to today, we are in February 2026, and now we have Donald Trump sitting in the White House. So on paper, when Donald entered the White House for his second time, for the second time, it was we had this optimism, I would say, that this relationship will grow stronger, and the relationship will enter what we call strategic intimacy. We had Marco Rubio called and convened the Quad immediately. We had the meeting in Feb in the White House. And that was a moment, and we all remember how Jay Shankar was sitting on the front row, in Trump's inauguration, very cocky in his own thing, because we thought it's just gonna get better. But unfortunately, then we had this, what I call the Trump factor kicked in. And, Trump's love a win. And he took a full credit for this, for ending that brief conflict between India and Pakistan back in May. And definitely Pakistan played their cards right. They recommended Donald Trump to the Nobel Peace Prize, and everyone knows how much Donald Trump wanted that prize. So, but the question is, what about India? So, mediation for India is a hard no. It's a matter of a national principle, national pride, national strategy, and the idea is that if we will do that, it would seem not only as a surrender of an agency, but also could be a very dangerous precedence when it comes that might encourage future interference in India's business. And of course, India don't want that. And I think what was really important and what really annoyed the Indians is the fact that for 25 years, Indians are trying to build this relationship, and they're trying to convince Washington that look at India in a different way. So Trump placed India and Pakistan almost on the same position. He treated it the same, and I think this is against Indian narrative, because India is trying to project that this is the state that sponsored terrorism, and we're the one fighting it. So there is asymmetry in this equation, and we're not in the same line. So and I think then later things started to get a bit messier when Trump invited the Pakistani chief of staff, General Asim Munir, to the White House just few weeks after the terror attack in Pahalgam in Kashmir. And then he refuses to the trade deal. Then he called India a dead economy. And then, of course, he slams them with a 50% tariff, which is one of the highest among the other countries. And 25 out of this percent is actually a penalty fee for buying Russian oil. So when I think when we look at it, it's what I call a very culture tact. It's a great case of lack of culture tact. In international relations, especially when you're dealing with a country like China, like India, concept, and it's also true about China, by the way, the concept of dignity, honor, those things, play a different role. And insults like, Trump style, you know, they don't work. And look what really happened, after that. What was India's response? It was a very tactical cold shoulders. We saw Modi visiting China after he wasn't visiting there for 7 years. And then we saw all these pictures when he was hugging and smiling and holding hands with the Russian and Chinese counterpart, as you mentioned. And that moment was all about conveying a message to Donald Trump that India can walk away. We can walk away anytime. It's a reminder that India doesn't need anyone. And, it actually in this world, and Trump treated them like everyone. You can't treat us like everyone else. We are India with this massive market, about to be the third largest economy. And definitely, we are going to be a major pole in this new geopolitical order. So, we have our own economy that can sustain itself after all. So we don't need anybody else. And that is the India's mindset. And I think we saw another proof for this attitude. We just got last week with the signing of what they call the mother of all deals between the India and EU. And of course, this trade deal was negotiated over almost 2 decades. But, no doubt that this time, actually, the Trump factor helped. So while Trump was actually focusing on domestic production and decided to charge fees from every country that wants to get in access to the American market, um, other countries needs to find and outlets for their overproduction. And India is one of these countries. In or a country like India, a rising economy like India cannot afford to be caught unprepared. So I think this signing of the European India trade deal is a massive, it's a huge step for what we call this new geopolitical order. And in many ways, it's still I think I see this as a great victory again for the West, because eventually this agreement, the mother of all agreement, can actually give a major boost to infrastructure project like the India Middle Eastern European Economic Corridor, what we call the AMEC. Those things are definitely a part of American interest. They see this as a counterweight to the Chinese BRI. So definitely, this is what we see today. And I just saw like 10 minutes ago that the reports that Washington and Delhi is about to announce a major breakthrough and might about the FTA. So we're all looking forward to what will happen in the next
Thank
coming.
you. No, you covered a lot of ground there, and I appreciate it. Someone had actually asked about the EU trade agreement, so I'm glad that you touched on that. So let's turn now to the relationship between India and Israel, and again, providing a brief historical overview as well. And if you can share your thoughts on where the relationship is heading and what it means for both countries, and in particular, can you discuss the memorandum of understanding that was signed this past November by India and Israel, which I understand was at least in part based on the two countries' shared challenges of terrorism, and which addresses joint production of military equipment, increased bilateral collaboration in various aspects from cyber and intelligence to R&D.
So if we said like the India US relationship is what I call a very complex dance, I think the India Israel relationship is more of what I shared a shared destiny. And even though the relationship is quite young because they formed a relationship only in 1992, but I feel that the real coming out party of this relationship really happened in July 2017. That was the time when Prime Minister Modi visited Israel. It was the first time that an Indian prime minister ever visit Israel. So I think it wasn't, just a diplomatic milestone. It was more than that. I think that was the moment that their relationship upgraded to what we call a strategic partnership. And we just saw he's about to visit here again by the end of this month. So this is just another proof of where this relationship, where this relationship actually stands. But the question is what really drives this partnership. And I feel the most important thing is that the shared DNA of a threat perception. Both countries are, in a way, also a modern incarnation of Asian civilization. So this is just another line that we're mentioning. It is very important to understand when we try to understand how these two entities actually play and how they evolve and how they operate in this international arena. Both of them, of course, were a British outpost born out of the chaos of the post World War II, and of course shaped by a very bloody, partition, and had the refugee crisis, and they live with this constant fear and the shadow of war. And Prime Minister Modi, when he was asked about the India-Israel relationship, he called it like a convergence of similarities. That's how he called it. And he said that both countries live in what they call a very complex geography, Israel with its Arab neighbors and India with Pakistan. But I feel what is really bringing them together is the fact that these two countries, they were in the front line fighting jihadi terrorism. Since the day of their establishment. So that's definitely puts them together. And I think, personally, if you ask me, I think that up until October 7, the relationship was more still in that equation of a buyer and seller. And of course, the number cannot lie. Every year, Israel sells almost $1 billion defense tech to India. And that includes everything: drones, radar, satellites, and whatever you want. But I always felt that this relationship has to be deeper than that. And I've talked about it years ago, and I'm glad to see that nowadays the government is actually changing this policy. And so in the beginning, we had the Make in India initiative when it comes to defense. And of course, that definitely wasn't really comfortable for Israeli defense company, but they had to adjust. But the fact that they adjust their bureaucracy, that doesn't mean they adjust their mindset. So yes, it's true. We have companies like IAI and Rafael who are, right now not just selling missiles, they're like setting up joint ventures and actually building niche system on Indian soil. So, but I feel like there is a lot of things to do. And if you really ask me what we need to do in order to, you know, uh, use the full potential actually of the defense partnership. I think to bring this relationship into full partnership, into full potential, I would say that what you need to do is actually send the people who works in this defense companies in this Israeli defense companies, send them back home. If I was me, I would like tell them, get this paycheck, don't come to the office tomorrow. We need new blood in the system. We need young people with a different mindset, without prejudges. We need new people who can understand the new India. And I think it's going to be a process. And right now, the bureaucracy is adjusting itself, and the strategy of these ministries, if it's the Ministry of Defense or the Foreign Ministry or the Prime Minister office, they definitely um, starting to understand that. But I think it will take time. Um, if we look at the relationship during the Gaza war, I think it was also the Gaza war was also important because both countries understand something. The war in Gaza has taught Israel a very, very clear and, unfortunately, I'm saying painful lesson that friendship is not just like abstract philosophy. It's about who stands firm when the world turns away. And like the old saying, a true friend walks in when everybody else walks out. So and I think it's also true in this case. Look at our allies like Germany. They were imposing arms embargo on Israel, uh, trying to surrender to some domestic pressure. But if we look at India, India still stood still like a rock, and of course India played its diplomatic game with double standard declaration publications. But we know that behind the scene they stood rock beside Israel. And this is something that really, I think, also touched the people, the hearts of the Israelis who weren't really aware of the importance of India. And when they saw that why Israel is isolated, even on social media, that people were, that they got the full support actually were Indians, and with journalists, the Indian journalists that portrayed the Israeli narrative, a more objective narrative. That's also definitely a major, progress. Um, but if you look at the war, think about it. While the IDF were focusing on replacing the tanks engine, the German tanks engine, or the German missiles, a made in Indian drones produced by Elbit Adani that produced in a facility in Hyderabad, India, were already in Gaza over the sky, providing a very vital intelligence. Who knows, maybe about the hostages. So I think for Israel, as if you look at it, if you look at the recent changes in Israel foreign policy and also defense policy, I think the meaning of strategic autonomy changed after October 7th. So we saw that the price for over relying on one country, one major power, including the US, that's the truth. But it was always exposed, and this is what really driving Israel right now to move on from dependency to interdependency with India. And of course, that's not a replacement for the vital and important relations we have with the US. But definitely, Israel is shifting its look towards the east, and we see that through different steps that Israel is doing. So I think when we look at India, Israel as a partnership, I think this partnership is really, it's not dependent who's sitting in the White House, and it's really not related to the Gaza war. I think it's very, if you look at it, it's very pragmatic relationship. It's a state to state partnership that build on that shared threat perception and also necessity. And that also includes agriculture, water innovation, cyber defense, etc. So so I think this we will see this relationship becoming more and more important for both sides, and specifically for Israel after October 7. And also, if you look at it, India faces the Chinese specter, and Israel also seek to diversify its alliance. Definitely, there is a we can see here this perfect convergence, and Israel, it's with its unique technological edge. I think we need to act as the early investors in India's rise. Okay. And the mindset needs to be that we're helping to build the next superpower, the next democratic superpower. And I think in return, India is also providing Israel with what we call the strategic depth and reliability that Israel is needed in this fragmented world. And so I think if we look at it, the Delhi Jerusalem kind of partnership is not just a trend or a fashion like some expert called it. It's what I call a long term architectural pillar of this new international order.
Thank you so much for that, Oshrit. We actually, I know you wanted to talk about the trilateral relationship between the three countries, U.S., India, and Israel, but I do want to get to some of the audience because they have some really great questions here. Somebody asked about India's 200 million Muslims, which is approximately 14% of its population. How do they feel about India's mostly warm relationship with Israel?
Well, I think Muslims in India are integral part of the Indian society. They are Muslim voters for the BJP party. Muslims that you can't talk about the Muslim, as a group because they're divided. There are Muslim who vote for the BJP. There are Muslim who vote for the Congress. But definitely, we had this. If we talk about Indians in general. And among Indians, definitely, that there is the Congress Party, who ruled India for 30 years, over 30 years. They were major supporters of Palestinian and the Palestinian issue, and that narrative is still playing there. And it's still, we saw Priyanka Gandhi coming to the parliament wearing this, what was a watermelon, the sign of the pro-Palestinian protests, and we see every time these things. We saw some Bollywood actress um, uh, uh, posting the pro-Palestine and echoing the pro-Palestine narrative. So I think it's really individual, and I think you can't talk about the Muslim as just one group and how they feel about how they feel about India's relationship with Israel. They're Muslim that are very liberal and open-minded, and they think that India is actually their patriotic India. So thinking that India is benefiting from this relationship because they have a better defense system, they have better future with agriculture technology and water technology. So definitely, we can't talk about the Muslim as just one community.
Thank you. So a couple people are asking about India and Pakistan and where that relationship stands today. But if you can just maybe touch on the India-Pakistan relationship and the most recent conflict, is that something that relates to perhaps the fact that Pakistan's military equipment was Chinese and perhaps outclassed the equipment used by India, which was French and Israeli hardware? And is there a way that you can look at the conflict as being something positive for India?
I think, in every conflict, we in Israel said, through every conflict and every war and every operation, we just becoming better. This is the Israeli narrative. That's what we as Israelis says. So I think it's great to India. They were able to, check their system, how they operate, the readiness of the army. So it's good in many ways to, see how your equipment actually work in real time. But definitely India is buying, defense tech and ammunition from Israel, from France, from America. And that geopolitical game is, you can see that in the defense sector as well. So China, Turkey, they're the one actually providing tech and ammunition and drones and to Pakistan. So each side is playing their own game, and I think that we definitely don't want to have wars and continue wars. But when you face a situation like that, and India decided to really be more assertive when it comes to its approach towards terrorism, which is something that Modi is promoting since he came to power. Um, yeah, I think this is what we're going to see. And Israelis' equipment are being used. And I think right now, post Sindoor operation, I think India is buying even more equipment from Israel. So, and Pakistan definitely is buying more from Turkey. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. A couple people are asking about internal politics in India, and someone asked how much the India Israel relationship depends on personalities, for instance, Modi.
Well, that's a good question. I say that also to the people here, to the ministries, that we always need to be prepared for the time that Modi and Bibi won't be there. But I think when we look at it, the India-Israel relationship started actually, it was evolved during the Congress time, during also Manmohan Singh. So what the BJP really did, it's actually were more putting it there. They were not shy. They were not hiding their relationship. It was like a romance back in the days. India constantly hide its lover, Israel, when it comes to the public. But I think now, the BJP said we're not hiding anything. Why we should hide? Why we should hide? Because we are afraid of the the public opinion in the Gulf, the public in the Muslim world, the public opinion in India. We don't need to hide this relationship. So I think definitely even the BJP is about to, I think, win also in the next term. So BJP are a big fan of Israel. We have strong connections there. So I think that will continue. And in case some change, some upheaval going to happen, and we're going to see the Congress party win, which I don't see that happening at least in the next 10 years. But even if it's going to happen, I think we will see the same. We will see maybe less defense deals, but definitely they will still need our technologies. They still need they're still committed to the voters. They need to keep India's economic rise. They need to keep the pace. So they still need Israeli innovation, Israeli ideas. So I think that will continue, but maybe not what we see today. And maybe we will see more pro-Palestine kind of declaration, official declaration of the government, that we might see. But as a relationship, I think the necessity is there. And after all, as I said, we still share the same threat perception. So the fact that the Congress Party, when the Mumbai was being attacked, they didn't decide to do anything. That's a question. But that doesn't mean that it harmed Israel. Actually, after that, they came to Israel, and Israel assists them when it comes to their um, strategies of combat terrorism. So even the Congress party, collaborate with Israel.
In our last minute or so, Oshrit, I just wanted to ask you your thoughts on Trump's Board of Peace and whether you think that India will join and what that means about the Indian US relationship.
So the Trump, what I call the BOP, India got invitation. And right now we have 22 countries who signed who joined this organization, this new body. I think New Delhi has hit what I call the pause button. Uh, I think it was kind of like a strategic pause. And there are many reasons to that. And I think first of all is, what we call the pay as state kind of provision. Trump is asking $1 billion contribution just to be on a table. And for countries like India, which always prioritize the international order based on the UN charter, that definitely raises a fundamental question. Is this about legitimacy, or just is about just a transaction? Are we buying a seat, or are we buying the future? And I think there's a big but here. You know, the temptation of India joining this group is definitely there. And I think the reason that they might thinking and considering it is the momentum, is the timing. Because right now, the India-US relationship are going through what we saw and what we mentioned earlier, what we call a rough patch. And we have a trade deal that's been stuck for a few months. And the Quad summit has been postponed. And also, and India is currently facing one of the highest tariff in the world. So I think in many ways, joining this BOP could actually be India's way to smooth things out with Washington. But there's many elements when it comes to joining the BOP that definitely India is considering. I think also India definitely has a lot of stakes in the Middle East, and they want to be involved. They have millions of migrant workers. They have a diaspora, deep energy and defense ties. So India wants to be engaged with what's really happening. But in many ways, I think if we, this is actually a question that relates to global governments, because um, India is trying to, for years, trying to call for reform in the UN Security Council, unfortunately without any result. And if this old system refused to accept India to change, maybe this BOP is India's moment, to step up and kind of like help to shape this and design these new rules of this game. And so if you ask me if India will join the BOP, I think this is like the $1 billion question right now, but I can tell you one thing for certain, that India isn't just looking for a chair at the table. It's actually making sure that the table is stable enough to build a future on.
Thank you so much for that. We covered a lot of ground in a short period of time, and I so appreciate you providing us with your insights, taking the time this afternoon to join us. Thank you to everybody in the audience for joining. Again, this is recorded. Please pass along in your networks. It was an important conversation. I look forward to seeing you all next week. Alex Selsky will be on Insider Israel on Wednesday at 3 p.m. So please join us for that as well. Thank you, and I wish you all a good afternoon.